Welcome to TaNaCh Talk. I am your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Torah Talk Weekly Parsha with our awesome Rabbi Rafi, the man Mollot, coming back to you. How much we miss you. That is so true. No truer words have ever been spoken. Welcome back, Rabbi. How are you today?
With an intro like that, I'm doing great.
Oh man, yeah. So this is good. So I missed you for a few weeks, but you and I were talking earlier, and you was kind of this would be good information for us all to be aware of. Now we missed 2 weeks of recordings, but we really only missed, as you mentioned, just one weekly Parsha. So, and my request was that you kind of mention a little bit about that for so the people who are not too much familiar with Judaism and how that all works, you can kind of give us a little quick word on how all that is supposed to take place annually.
Yeah. Okay, so the last time we met, we spoke about the Parsha called Tzav, which is the second Parsha of the book of Leviticus, starting with Vayikra, then Tzav, and then comes Shemini. Now, we were off for 2 weeks, so one would think that we would miss 2 weekly portions. However, because those 2 weeks were, if you want to say, interrupted by the festival of Passover, one of the 2 Shabbats, one of the 2 Sabbaths that occurred between our last recording and this recording occurred on the festival of Passover. And during the festival of Passover, we do not read the regular weekly Torah reading. Rather, we read a special reading for Passover. So only one of the Sabbaths that we missed contained a Parsha, and the other one did not. So the Parsha of Shemini, which follows Tzav, we read the previous Shabbat, Saturday before this recording. But the Saturday before that, we did not read one of the weekly Parshas. So now, having missed only one, we're now on to another very interesting phenomenon, because the Parsha following Shemini, which we missed, is Tazria. And the Parsha following Tazria is Metsorah. Now, those 2 Parshios is plural for Parsha, in certain years, they are combined, so that we read both in 1 week. And this is one of those years. Why there are years like that, maybe I'll just elaborate a little bit more. This is very interesting information, by the way.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
It's very worthwhile to hear this. The Jewish year follows a lunar calendar for the most part, but also a solar calendar to some degree. And I'll explain how. And it's interesting that in the Western world, in the Christian calendar, it's purely solar, and the Muslim calendar is purely lunar, and the Jewish calendar is something in between. What's called an intercalated calendar, which means it blends together a lunar and solar cycle in a manner I will explain. But it's interesting that the Western world is the Christian world. To the east of the land of Israel, you have the Muslim world, and in the center between the east and the west is the land of Israel. Perfectly, they call the center of the universe, perfectly centered between these different worldviews, and it's in a certain way a middle ground that bridges the two in the way the calendar works. And now, I didn't mean to talk about this, but we missed the Parsha of Shemini. I'll just say something about Shemini that ties into this theme. The portion of Shemini contains the laws regarding which animals are permitted to be eaten by the Israelites, Jews, and which animals are not, the so-called pure and impure species. And by the way, the terms pure and impure, we're going to examine this week in class and understand that the English translation, once again, of pure and impure is a misnomer, much like we explained when we were talking about sacrifices in the portion of Tzav, that sacrifice is not an accurate translation of the word korban. Korban from the word korov, meaning closeness, that which creates closeness, and so too the Hebrew word tameh, which is translated as unclean or impure, it's not correct, and tahor, which is translated as clean or pure, not correct. We'll get into that. But the so-called pure and impure, clean and unclean species are mentioned in Parshas Shemini. And the Torah identifies that a land creature, it's called in Hebrew a behema or a chaya, needs to have two physical signs that identify it as a kosher species. And the two physical signs are that they are chewing the cud, so literally bringing up the cud, and which means, for those who don't know what that is, that the food is swallowed and then it is regurgitated and chewed again and swallowed again. So there's multiple periods of chewing and swallowing. That's a cud chewing creature. And it also needs to have a split hoof. Now, just to say a short word on that, why these two symbols is something I heard many years ago. I believe the source of this idea is the Vilna Gaon. For those who know who that is, Rabbi Elijah Vilna lived in the late 18th century, maybe early 19th century. A very, very great genius, as his name suggests. The Gaon of Vilna means the genius of Vilna, Rabbi Elijah Vilna. I believe he says this explanation, that the two signs represent two different worldviews. The worldview of the, so to speak, of the foot, you have the sign of the hoof, is to, in a certain way, represent the worldview that embraces progress. The foot is the tool of the body to make progress, to walk forward, to go ahead. Whereas the sign in the mouth of the chewing of the cud is the sign that represents the worldview of remaining behind, staying back, attaching oneself to the past. Another word for chewing the cud in English is ruminating. That's the technical term. Animals ruminate. They ruminate, they chew the cud. But when we use the word colloquially, when a person says, well, I'm ruminating on that, it means I'm sort of thinking about it. I'm dwelling on it in my mind. So to ruminate is to remain behind, so to speak. And the hoof represents the tool of going forward. And the Torah identifies different animals that have only one of these two signs. The Torah identifies 4 animals that have only one of these two signs, because an animal with neither of these signs, they don't chew the cud and they don't split the hoof, are not kosher. In our modern terminology of kosher, they're not kosher. The word kosher doesn't appear in the context in the Torah. That's our modern term for it. The kosher in Hebrew means fitting, appropriate, suitable, not appropriate, not suitable, not kosher. The animal with both signs is kosher, is suitable, is fitting, it's appropriate. But the Torah says there are some animals that have only one. Unless you think that one is enough, it identifies these 4 creatures, and it says, these you shall not eat, they are unclean. With only one, they're unclean. With only one sign, they're unclean. And they are the pig. The pig splits the hoof but does not chew the cud. We could say a whole class on this. I didn't want to because it's last week, but I just want to attach it to something I'm saying now. And it's impromptu. Then it talks about the camel, the hare, and the hyrax. If you don't know what those animals are, I'm not going to help you now. The camel, the hare, and the hyrax, that all of them chew the cud but don't split the hoof. Okay? These are unkosher. Now, what's interesting is that in the symbolism of our traditional literature, the pig is the animal that represents the Western civilization, is represented by the pig. Why? Maybe you'll hear a little bit now why. There's a lot of depth in that symbol, but that would be the class for last week's Parsha, not this week. And the symbol for the Eastern Dominion is the camel. Now, maybe for obvious reasons, because the pig is an animal that's very much embraced in the West, and the camel is an animal that's very much used in the East. But the symbolism of each of these animals represents actually the worldview and the culture, that the pig splits the hoof, but it doesn't chew the cud. It has the symbol for progress, but not the symbol for rumination. So what does the Western world do? It casts away tradition and it embraces progress. Out with the old, in with the new. Modernization, modernization, modernization. Let's throw away the old world. Let's throw away tradition. Let's throw away old-fashioned things and just everything new, everything changed. Whatever is old is automatically bad. That's what my parents and grandparents did. Phooey, right? Let's do something they didn't do before. And the Western world makes a lot of technological progress and so on. It's a world of progress. That's the pig. Doesn't ruminate. It only has the hoof. The Eastern world, on the other hand, the camel, what chews its cud? It ruminates, but it doesn't have the hoof. So we find in the East cultures that are more what we call backwater, old world, traditional. They're less advanced technologically, etc. And so we see that's like the third world, right? So the camel represents that culture which is trapped in the past. It sort of ruminates on the past. It does not make progress. The kosher animal is the one that has two signs, both signs. It has the symbol for progress and it has the symbol for rumination. That the correct, balanced worldview and way to live one's life is to hold on tight to one's traditions, but in the light of one's traditions to also move forward and embrace the appropriate progress that is suitable for the generation in which one finds himself. And if you look at the land of Israel, that's situated in between, you see that it's a land that's very technologically advanced. It has the most advanced military. It had right the Americans give us these their military equipment. When I say us, I mean like Israel. And then what Israel does is they soup them up, and then they return to America a more technologically advanced version of the same thing. And now America uses Israeli technology. So a lot of people complain about why does America give Israel so much military aid? The people who know, I'm talking about non-Jews, people in the military who have a military connection, Americans who are in the know of what Israel shares with the United States in terms of military technology, the debt of the so-called military aid that's given to Israel is paid back manyfold, because they give Israel jets and Israel makes these jets into super jets and then shares the technology back with America. And it's the same with not only military technology, but medical technology. Israel is, I'm not looking at a statistic, but from what I know, at the forefront of advancement in medical innovation and technology, life-saving technologies that are being exported all over the world and saving countless lives. The same is true, your cell phone technology was invented in Israel. The microchip processors in your computers were invented in Israel. So it's a country that is at the cusp of progress, but at the same time is one that's deeply rooted in its tradition. It's a people with a deep history, with a connection to tradition, to Torah observance. Now, granted that the majority of the population of Israel identifies as secular, that's true, and the Orthodox in Israel is maybe only about 20% of the population, but there's a lot of so-called traditional people in Israel. That means even if they don't identify as Orthodox, but they keep many, many traditions, far more than you would identify such a person as totally secular. So the full-blown, hardcore, atheist, secular population in Israel is maybe 10%. The other 90% are definitely connected to tradition. So the land of Israel, the people of Israel, are one that is definitely emblematic of a balance between these two worldviews, the world of progress and the world of tradition. It blends the two symbols of the creatures that the Torah identifies as this without that is not appropriate. It's not kosher. It's not fitting. So why do I bring that up? Okay, so let's bring it back to where we started. We haven't even touched the Parsha, but we're talking about the calendar. The Western world embraces a solar calendar. The Muslim world embraces a lunar calendar. The Jewish law system, the Torah, embraces an intercalated calendar, one that blends lunar and solar. How is that? Because the Torah identifies for us that we should count lunar months. We should look to the moon. when we see the moon, we declare the new month. You know, the new moon is the new month. For those who understand how the lunar cycle works, that the moon appears in the sky as a small sliver. It grows to a full moon in the over the course of 2 weeks, and then it shrinks back into nothingness that you can see, into invisible over the next 2 weeks. So in one lunar month, that's one lunar cycle, okay? And that's 1 month on the Jewish calendar. Now, how long is the lunar cycle? There's a tangent on a tangent on a tangent already, but this is such an amazing fact that to this day, no one has a sufficient explanation of this fact other than this is divine information. But the lunar cycle, the Talmud records an oral tradition of the lunar cycle, okay? And the oral tradition recorded in the Talmud of the length of the lunar cycle, that means how long from one appearance of the moon to the next. And by the way, this is an average, is 29 days, 12 hours, 44 minutes, 3 seconds, and several fractions of a second. So down to the fraction of a second, okay? There was no way to confirm this calculation to exactitude until modern times, when NASA, I don't know if it was NASA per se, when modern scientists had the technology to observe using lasers and other things. They put a laser on the moon and they shined it back to Earth, and they were able to calculate with exactitude the cycle of the moon. And they calculated it to be 29 days, 12 hours, 44 minutes, 3 seconds, and several fractions of a second. Meaning to the fraction of a second that is recorded in an oral tradition in the Talmud of how long the lunar cycle is, we have confirmed with modern science. There's no way that human beings could know this in ancient times without divine information. That's one of the proofs of the divinity of the oral tradition, certainly of the Torah in general, of the calendrical system. So again, the Torah commands us to count months based on the lunar cycle. The sighting of the new moon is the beginning of the month, which always occurs after either 29 or 30 days. So a lunar month, a Jewish month on the Jewish calendar, will be either 29 or 30 days long based on this average. Okay. Now, I should go on a tangent of that tangent and tell you that nowadays we don't follow the sighting of the moon, because that can only be done in the High Court in Jerusalem, which we no longer have in our present state of non-restoration of the temple. So we have what's called a man-made calendar, meaning the rabbis of yore calculated, based on this calculation, they calculated all the months and years into the future, and we followed that calendar that was set out by the rabbis a couple thousand years ago. We've been following the calendar ever since, and it works out just dandy, because that's all we have now. Okay, now where does the sun come in? There are 12 lunar months. 12 lunar months of 29 or 30 days equals 1 lunar year of 354 days. Everybody knows that the solar year has 365 days. So at the end of a solar year versus the end of a lunar year, there's a discrepancy of 11 days. The lunar year comes up 11 days short. So that means after 2 lunar years, we're 22 days short of the solar year. Now, why is that important? Because the solar year determines the seasons, in case you never thought about that. The solar, based on where the Earth is going around the sun, is what seasons we experience. And so every time we do one cycle around it, one solar year, it's very easy, simple system. Although even our solar year is not exact. We have to do leap years, and every few whatever even our solar calendar is not as exact as the Jewish lunar calendar, but I'll tell you even how more exact it is. So every year we're coming up 11 days short on the solar year. And after 2 years, 22 days. And after 3 years, 33 days. That means after 3 years, we're a whole month short. And what that means is, after a number of years, our festivals begin to shift into different seasons. And that's a problem, because we have in the Torah the Passover, which we just celebrated, and the Torah says, Shamor es chodesh aviv. You must observe, you must safeguard the month of Aviv, which is the spring, the month of the spring. The Passover has to occur in the spring. That's the springtime is when we had our Exodus, and we must experience the festivals in the same season in which they occurred. So the Passover has to be in the spring. If I follow a pure lunar calendar, after a few years, my Passover goes into the winter, and a few years later, my Passover goes into the fall and to the summer and so on. That's a problem. Now, for Muslims who keep a pure lunar calendar, they don't care. They're not regarding the solar year at all. The seasons are irrelevant to their celebrations. So Ramadan moves throughout the year. Sometimes Ramadan will be in the summer, and they have to fast a nice long day. Sometimes Ramadan will be in the winter, and they get a break. The days are shorter. Obviously, it depends where you are in the world, but we're focusing on in the land of Israel when we talk about springtime. So how do we do that? How do we avoid this problem? So the way we avoid this problem is that we intercalate, we add in a 13th month every few years. Every 2 or 3 years, we add a 13th month in order to realign the lunar calendar with the solar calendar. It's a very technical point, but so that 7 years out of 19 years, there's a 19-year cycle, and 7 out of those 19 years, there will be 13 months rather than 12, and it works out exactly every 19 years. We're at the exact same starting point, that the dates of the solar calendar and the lunar calendar align exactly. And there's other applications of this, but the point that I'm making is that the Torah way of calculating time bridges 2 extremes: the solar calendar on one hand and the lunar calendar on the other hand. The Torah is the system. It's a system of perfect balance, of harmony, of being right in the comfortable middle. Okay, how in the world did I get on that? Oh, why was that? Here's why I'm talking about that. So 7 years we have 13 months. Well, what do we do with the Parshas during those 13 months, right? Because if I have more weeks in the year, how do I balance out the Parshios? So it turns out there are exactly enough Parshios to fill in all the weeks of a 13-month year without a problem. But when I only have 12 months, that means I have to combine some of the Parshios together. So some weeks will have combined Parshios. This is one of those weeks. And that took me all that time to get around to why we're learning about 2 Parshas today that I haven't even started the first one yet. And we're halfway into the class. But that said, I did give a partial class on last week's Parsha. So at least we got that done. And I gave you a whole lot of information, philosophical and technical, about Judaism that I hope was worth your time. Now let's get into our Parsha. Double Parsha this week. The Parsha of Tazria and the Parsha of Metsorah. The main topic that is common to both Parshios is the topic of what's called Sarat. There is a skin affliction discussed in these Parshios, these sections, that's called in the Hebrew Sarat or Tsaras, depending on your pronunciation. And this is another misnomer, is another English misnomer added to your lexicon. For those of you, all these at home who have your little notebooks, and you go, oh, I learned that korban doesn't mean sacrifice. Okay. And now I'm learning, he said that tameh does not mean impure, unclean. Tahor does not mean clean or pure. And now I'm learning that Sarat is not leprosy. Okay. Sarat is mistakenly translated as leprosy. It's not leprosy. It appears like leprosy. There are certain similarities, physical similarities between Sarat and leprosy that there's really no other English word that's sufficient to describe it. It's a leprosy-like condition, but it is not leprosy, as I will attempt to prove in this class. But we're dealing mostly with the skin affliction called Sarat, okay, which is where the second Parsha gets its name from, Metsorah. A Metsorah means a person afflicted with Saras, or does it? That's another word I would like to examine if we have time. There's never enough time. Okay. However, it's sort of bookended by a couple of other topics. The first Parsha, Tazria, begins with the laws concerning a woman who gives birth. That a woman who gives birth has certain laws of what's called in Hebrew Tuma and Tahara, which again is translated wrongly as impurity and purity that apply to a woman who's given birth. And that Tazria, the word Tazria comes from the word Zera in Hebrew. The word Zera in Hebrew means seed. The Parsha begins, Isha ki Tazria. When a woman is literally seeded, that means when a woman conceives, she conceives a child. She is seeded. Isha ki Tazria, that's right. And it goes through those laws initially and talks about the birth and what she can and can't do following the birth, for what period of time, and that the child, if it's a male, has a circumcision at 8 days, etc. Then we get into the laws of the skin affliction. I'll just do a quick summary. Then it talks about when this affliction of Sarat appears on clothing, can appear on clothing, and when this affliction of Sarat appears on the walls of one's house. Sarat can come in 3 forms: skin, clothing, house. Okay, it can afflict 3 things. And following that, at the end, we have some laws regarding a woman in her menstrual period and a man who has an unusual emission from his sexual organ, which I've seen it translated as a gonorrheal emission. Whether or not that's exactly accurate, I haven't investigated. I don't really know what that is, but it's some type of an unusual emission, which also renders him tameh, again, translated as pure, impure, unclean. Hopefully we can clean up that translation. It's not accurate. Okay, so those are the topics. All right. Here's what I would like to do to start off. I would like to dispel this misnomer that Tuma is impurity or uncleanness, and that Tahara, the opposite term, is cleanness or purity, okay? The reason we use those words is because the English language does not really have an analogous term to translate with, so it's kind of like more or less, okay? But it leads to such misunderstanding that you really have to go to school to understand what this really is and what it really is not, okay? All right. So, William, are you still with me? Did I lose you? Are we good? Let me know if you lost me or not. I guess if you lost me, you can't tell.
I'm here. Sorry. Okay. I got up to go grab a drink.
I just keep talking. I don't know if anyone's listening anymore.
I literally just got up to go get a drink, and I was running across the studio to get to you.
I know when to get you.
I love it. It's okay.
Keep you on your toes.
You definitely keep me on my toes. No doubt about that. So, I mean, actually enjoying this. This is a lot of stuff I hadn't heard about this Parsha before. So, and I've heard a lot of different things from, like I mentioned before, I use Chabad.org a lot. And you can go to Chabad.org and actually find any Torah portion there, and they'll have 20 or 30 lectures on each Torah Parsha. And so I've heard of so many, and you bring me a lot of new information I haven't heard. So enjoying it quite a bit.
Okay, great. So I really want to handle this topic of Tuma and Tahara, so-called purity and impurity. I want to handle the topic of Tzaras as leprosy or not. Just English ruins everything. I should really say translations ruin everything. Okay, so we have many forms in this parsha of what's called Tuma. Tuma is, again, translated as impurity or uncleanness, and Tahara, purity or cleanness. And it takes the form of when a woman gives birth, what laws of so-called purity and impurity apply to her. The person with the skin affliction, what purity and impurity apply to him. The menstruant woman, the man with the unusual emission, they all are subject to laws of Tuma and Tahara, purity and impurity, as well as we mentioned last week that there are species that are called Tameh, impure, and species that are called Tahor, pure, so to speak. Those are the wrong words, but that's the words that unfortunately are used. So what does that mean? Okay. So people, like, the first objection is, usually this comes up in the context of discussions over a woman's menstruation. For those who aren't aware, in the Torah, when a woman experiences her period, a husband and wife are required to separate from one another as far as intimate relations. They have to separate from intimate relations. The Torah requires for a period of 7 days, following which she immerses in what's called a mikveh, again, they call it the ritual bath or a ritualarium. All these things are highly problematic when we translate them. It's a certain type of a body of water that gathers naturally. It's not water that's drawn up from a body of water like in a well or through a faucet, etc. It's a naturally gathered body of water. If there's time, we'll talk about even how that works. But of course, there are many rabbinic fences that revolve around these laws, and I'm not going to go into all the details. It's just not possible, and it's not the purpose of the class. But usually in the context of that, people get very touchy and people get very offended, and they go, "What are you saying, that a woman is dirty?" I've heard this a lot. A woman is dirty when she has her period. She's called impure, unclean. It's so disgusting. It's so misogynistic. That's a woman's natural cycle of producing a child, of the ovulation, etc. It's something beautiful. It's something natural. It's something that's involved in the production of life. How could it be put down in such pejorative terms? So really, this whole misunderstanding arises from the translation. When the Torah says the word tameh, really this is important information. All over the Torah we have this term. What does that really mean? I already told you it doesn't mean impure and it doesn't mean unclean. We have to understand the word tameh. How do you know what a word means in Hebrew? You have to look where else it appears, in what context, and what it means in that context. So if we look at the word tameh, we'll see that the root of the word tameh is the same as the word in Hebrew atum. Atum is the same root as the word tameh, the same Hebrew root. And the word atum very clearly, and I wish I had written down some verses. I neglected to write down the citations, but it appears in many places. It means closed or sealed. Shut, closed, sealed. It's often used in the prophets talking about oznayim atumot, closed ears. Closed ears of people who don't want to hear, they don't want to listen, they don't want to be rebuked. Their ears are atumot, their ears are sealed, closed. In modern Hebrew nowadays, when I lived in Israel for a period of time, and unfortunately, there's always the specter of the fear of chemical warfare. When I was in Israel, we had to have training of how to survive a chemical attack. And the first thing to surviving a chemical attack is to have in your apartment, in your domicile, something called a cheder atum, a sealed room. You need a sealed room. That means that you tape a sheet of plastic like cellophane over the window, so that with duct tape, whatever, so that no gases can leak into the room. Some of these rooms are equipped with windows that seal, kind of like hermetically seal, but we didn't have those. So it was like, okay, how do you turn your room into a cheder atum? Now the new apartments all built. Isn't that sad? Every new apartment is built with a cheder atum. It's built with a sealed room. So you close the door, you shut it, it's hermetically sealed. The windows are hermetically sealed. But in the old apartments, what did you do? You had to tape plastic around your window, and you would take a wet towel and you would shove it under the door in the case of a chemical attack, and this would seal off the cracks where chemical gases could come in. We were given gas masks. We were given survival kits. You had to have bottled water. You had to have a pot so you could go to the bathroom in the room, a bucket to be used as a makeshift toilet while you're in there. You had it was like an EpiPen. I don't know if it's an actual EpiPen, but it was like basically an injection that in case you were infected by the chemical gas, that you could shoot yourself with this pen and it would cause you to sweat profusely, and you would sweat the toxins out of you, and you would take those bottles of water and you would drink like 6 liters of water in 15 minutes so you didn't dehydrate. Like the injection was designed to dehydrate you. so that you could sweat out all the toxins, but you had to rehydrate yourself quickly. So you drink a lot of water. We got a whole training on it. Imagine living this way. Anyway, so, as they say, why would anyone want to be Jewish? So, Cheder Atum, it's a sealed room. There's a verse. Here's one verse I did write down. Rashi makes a point in this verse that I wanted to point out. In Job chapter 18, verse 3, it says, I'll tell you the Hebrew. It says, Madua nechshavnu chabehema. Why have we been thought of as beasts, animals? Nitminu ve'enichem. In your eyes, we are nitminu. The word nitminu is from that root of atum, tameh, tam. From the Rashi says the two root letters. Usually there's three root letters. The two root letters of this word are tet, mem, tam. We have become tam in your eyes. That means closed off, sealed. In other words, like animals, meaning we have no potential for growth. We're like animals. I'll tell you something about an animal. Every word in Hebrew has significance. It's a divine language. This was the language of creation. God spoke the world into being. The word of God became reality. So a word has the potential to truly represent the object in the physical world that it describes when we use the divine language of Hebrew. It's a perfect language that describes, we could have a whole class on this alone, and there are classes out there on this, how the Hebrew language describes physical reality perfectly. One of those words is the word behema. Behema is the word for an animal. Why? So the commentaries explain because the behema is made up of two words, which is ba, ma. Ba means in it, and ma means what. Ba, ma, in it is what it is. An animal is what it is, what it is. It cannot grow beyond its programming. I have pets, as I mentioned before. We have cats. Our cats have been giving birth nonstop. I had 3 cats, 3 cats give birth to a litter of 6 or 7 kittens each, okay? And some of them were less than a year old when they gave birth, mind you, okay? Within a year, they're already fully prepared to give birth. They know how to mate with nobody teaching them. Instinctively, they know how to mate. They know how to give birth on their own. You and I, not me personally, but a human being, have to go to a hospital. I mean, I know people give home births, but in generally speaking, we need a doctor, we need a nurse, we need a midwife, we need somebody to help us. Like a woman giving birth on her own is in big trouble, right? We need all kinds of help. And then with the baby, we need someone to teach her. I remember my wife, she needed a coach to teach her how do you nurse the baby, etc. The first time. You have to learn all this stuff. The cat, no problem, knows how to give birth, knows immediately to bite the sack that the animal's born in. She eats it. She knows how to nurse. And they do all this on their own. They're just less than 1-year-old animal, had no mother in its life to raise it, because we raised orphan kittens. And it just goes into a corner, gives birth. It knows its instincts. You look at an animal, it's born, a few minutes later, it's walking, it's doing all the things. An animal immediately knows what to do, and it's going to do the same things for the rest of its life. A human being starts off practically totally helpless. The only thing it knows how to do literally is to suck. And over the course of its life, the human being learns and grows and develops. And a person can learn how to become so much more than is basic in our programming. We are given the potential to go beyond our programming. So that's why we're called Adam. The reason we're called Adam, the commentaries tell us, is because we have a dual potential. We could be low, like Adama, like the earth, or we could raise ourselves up, like the verse that says, Adameh le'elyon, I shall make myself similar to that which is above. Adam could be Adama, the ground, there could be Adameh, I shall make myself similar le'elyon, to the one above. Man has potential for growth, but an animal is what it is, what it is. It can never grow beyond its programming. Ba-ma, in it is what it is. That's the spelling of the word behema. Okay, so when Job says, why are we thought of like an animal? Nitminu be'enechem, in your eyes we are nitminu, we are tam, we are closed, we are sealed, we are shut off, meaning we have no ability to grow. You think of us like animals, like we can't grow, we can't learn, we can't change. He's saying ironically, why are you Why are you judging us in this way? So tam means closed, without the ability for growth. It's a lack of potential. Tuma means lack of potential for growth. It's a state of being closed. It's a state of being shut. Inability to open up, to move forward, to grow. That's the idea of Tuma. Impurity, when we talk in the spiritual sense, is that your soul is in a state where it is lacking the potential for growth. What's the greatest proof of this? Is that the highest form of impurity, so to speak, of Tuma in the Torah is what's called Temei Mate, the impurity conveyed from a dead body, from a cadaver. Meaning all over the Torah, we have all kinds of laws of, again, I'm borrowing the terms, purity and impurity. There's different degrees of, what degree of, so to speak, impurity is conveyed and what it prevents you from doing or from touching, or where you can go or where you can't go, areas of sanctity, touching certain sanctified items, sacrifices, gifts to the priest, etc., etc., etc. It's all these different details are based on gradations of Tuma, gradations. What's the highest gradation? The highest gradation is that which is conveyed by a cadaver. And a person who comes in contact with a cadaver becomes on the highest, so to speak, the highest level, I don't know, highest, lowest, whatever you want to call it, the most severe level of so-called impurity, because the cadaver is without life. It's with no soul. There's literally no soul. Spiritually, it's empty. It's closed and shut from the potential for life and growth. All life and growth, all potential has been removed. That is so toxic in Judaism, which is all about life, the sanctity of life, the divinity of life, the potential for growth, the potential for upward change. That the absence of that is the furthest thing from what the Torah wants. So a body without a soul, or that had a soul and lost its soul, is, so to speak, the most impure. It's the most tameh. That's the most closed, spiritually closed thing that there is, and it conveys a status of spiritual closeness. And when a person is tameh, so to speak, impure, let's throw that word away. It reduces that spiritual contamination, if you were. It reduces his potential to absorb positive spiritual energy, to produce positive spiritual energy, to grow spiritually. And so too, the foods that we talked about in last week's Parsha, consuming those foods, so to speak, contaminates the body. In other words, for whatever reason, maybe for the reasons I told you, because the qualities of those animals represent negate the qualities that are conducive for growth in the Torah way. Ingesting those things bring those negative energies into you and stifles your ability to grow in the proper way. Therefore, they are tameh, unclean. It's not unclean. They are lacking potential for growth. They are closed off from life and growth potential. The highest example being, the most severe example being, a dead body. So here, Tahara, then, let's talk about so-called purity. Tahara doesn't mean purity or cleanness. It's the opposite. It means potential for life, potential for growth, potential for positive spiritual energy. Something that's imbued with that positivity is what we would call kiddusha, sanctity. But something that is tameh, it's closed off from the potential for sanctity. Something that is tahor is open to the potential for sanctity. And we'll demonstrate it from words in another place. Now, this verse that I'm about to cite for you is enigmatic, and it opens up a very big can of worms, but it's not our topic for our class, so sorry, you'll have to save it for another time. But in Exodus chapter 24, verse 10, it says, they saw the God of Israel, and underneath his feet was like the form of a sapphire stone, and it was like the essence of the heavens, or the essence of the sky. It's the same word in Hebrew. La tohar, in its tohar. Tohar is again the same word as tahor, pure, clean. in its, so you might say, I've seen translation, in its purity. In its purity, whatever they saw some kind of a vision. And yes, it's all metaphorical, but the vision that they saw, there was some type of a sapphire stone looking item, and it was like the essence of the sky or of the heaven in its tohar. What does that mean? So the classic commentary of Rashi tells us tohar means barur vitzalul. Barur vitzalul, which means clear and transparent. Clear and transparent. Tohar means transparency, clarity. So imagine you have a substance that's opaque. You know what opaque is? Light cannot pass through it. So it's shut off from light. Shut from light. But you have a surface that's transparent. It allows light to shine in. It allows light to shine out. It can receive light. It can give off light. It can radiate light because it's tohar. It's transparent. Tahara means transparency. Tahara means the potential to absorb and to radiate spiritual light. Spiritual light. It's the potential to absorb sanctity, to become a sanctified vessel. That potential is described as transparency. Now, by the way, tohar, it's a lot of related words in Hebrew. Tzohar, Zohar, and tohar are all related words. Tzohar is a light. God tells Noah, Tzohar ta'aseh bateva. You should make in the ark a tzohar. What is a tzohar? Many understand it to be a window, a skylight, to allow light into the ark. Transparency. Tzohar, related to the word tohar. Zohar means a brilliant light. These are all words in TaNaCh. I just don't have time to go into all the citations now. But it means a brilliant light that has the potential to pass through a transparent surface. There's many linguistic proofs and evidence to what I'm saying. The point I'm bringing is when we talk about in the Torah, all the laws of so-called purity and impurity, cleanness and uncleanness, it's such a terrible, tragic mistranslation that Tuma really means closedness to spiritual potential, and tohar means a transparency and openness for spiritual growth and potential. So what does that have to do with our Parsha of the woman giving birth? Listen to how perfectly it fits. She had within her a life. She was carrying a life in her, and that life has exited her. The life that inhabited her body has left, leaving a chasm, leaving an absence. The absence of life, potential, right, is the opposite of that. So where there's absence of life, there is a, so to speak, a death energy. There is an energy of Tuma, of closeness to life potential. When the life goes out, in the absence of that life is Tuma. There's so many examples I could give. It's just there's so little time. And then when we talk about what did I originally, so we start out that the woman who gives birth, she has to undergo a period of Tuma, not uncleanness, not impurity, of spiritual, a period where she is experiencing an absence of life potential. And because of that state, ritually, there are limitations on where she may go, what she may do, etc., until there is a, so to speak, like a healing procedure to restore the potential that was lost. Now, when, like I said, this comes up a lot in the context of menstruation. It's the same thing. While a woman is ovulating, while her system is building up, preparing to carry a life, so there is life potential building in her. When she menstruates, it's all flushed out. The potential to carry a life is flushed out at that time. So where we had a life potential, it's flushed out, and the absence of life potential leaves this gap. The absence of life potential is defined as tum'ah. Again, not impurity, not uncleanness. The closedness to life potential is a diminished ritual, spiritual state that results from the fact that we adore, that we put on a pedestal the life potential of a woman's physical biology, whether it's the process of childbirth itself, carrying the child and giving birth, or the process of the menstrual cycle. But at the end of that process is a loss of that high potential. That loss is defined as Tuma, a diminished potential for life. And there are ritual consequences that have to go through a kind of healing procedure. Okay, now when we get to the next topic in our, there's more to say, but I have to move on. We're already at the end of the hour, and I didn't even touch the idea of the skin affliction, which is so central. I hope you'll bear with me a few extra minutes.
Yeah, you can take as long as you need, definitely.
We get to Sarat, the skin affliction, which is called leprosy. Why? I don't know anything about leprosy. Thank God, I think we've more or less eliminated leprosy in our generation. But from what I understand, it was like the skin would like die. It was like a what do they call it? Like a necrosis. That the skin would literally die. It would like decay on the body. It would turn white like a corpse, and it was ultimately, it would spread, and the body would die and fall to pieces and crumble. If your fingers would fall off, all these gruesome things, and eventually the person would die. The manifestation on the skin of these like dry, scabby, white growths, whatever, are of leprosy, which again I don't have any expertise in, or similar in manifestations to what's described in the Parsha as the skin affliction of Sarat. So it's given a misnomer of leprosy. Zelo leprosy. This is not leprosy. Here are some proofs that it's not leprosy. The Torah says a person's going to see these spots on his skin, white spots that have a greenish tinge, a yellowish tinge, a reddish tinge, or just white. There's a certain, okay. These white spots, right? What does it say to do? It says you have to go to the Kohen. You have to go to the priest. Now, why are you going to a Kohen? Go to a doctor. If it's leprosy, go to a doctor. The priest is a spiritual teacher. He's not a doctor. So if this is a medical condition, the Torah enjoins us to seek medical help for our ailments. Rapo yirape, it says in the book of Exodus. Seek medical help. If it was a medical affliction, the Torah would say, go to the doctor. It says, no, go to the spiritual teacher. This is not a bodily, it manifests as a bodily affliction, but it's a symptom of a spiritual affliction. You need to go to the spiritual teacher. Then it says that the priest the Kohen will look at it, and the Torah gives you, certain descriptions of what he should see and what he should do. He'll tell you to go into seclusion for 7 days, and after 7 days he looks at it again. Did it grow? Did it stay the same? Did it shrink? Did it heal back to normal, etc.? There's all these different permutations that might occur, and the Torah says in each case what you do. Maybe he goes into another period of seclusion. But in the end of the day, certain symptoms will signal to the Kohen that this is indeed the condition of Sarat that the Torah describes as tameh, not impure, not unclean, an indication of a spiritual potential deficiency. And it says that the Kohen, let me see if I have the note in my, the citation in my notes. It says, in Leviticus chapter 13, verse 8, it says the Kohen will see, and behold, the blemish has spread on the skin. It says, Vitima'o ha-Kohen, and the Kohen will make him tameh. This is an active verb, Vitima'o. He will make, the priest, the Kohen will make him tameh. Tzara'at he, this is tzara'at. Now, it doesn't say the Kohen will declare him tameh. It doesn't say the Kohen will inform him that he is tameh. V'tima'o ha-Kohen. The Kohen will make him tameh. What do you mean? How do you make him tameh? So the law is, as a matter of fact, that the Kohen in his declaration, this is tzara'at, you are tameh, the man becomes tameh and he must go outside of the camp. His state of Tum'ah, it's not true for all different types of Tum'ah, of spiritual deficiency of potential. We don't have a word for it. That's why it's so awkward. Spiritual impurity. Not all of those different. Remember, I said there's many gradations. Not all of them result in a person having to exit the camp, but this one does. for reasons I really hope we'll get to discuss. Why this one specifically is so severe, he's got to go outside the camp. But until he says that, the man has no obligation to go out. Now, if you're going to say it's leprosy and it's contagious, which leprosy is to my knowledge, and he has to get out before it becomes a pandemic, right? Hey, I'll get him out of here. He's got leprosy. Why does it wait till the Kohen says it? And I was like, because they don't know it until the Kohen says it. But the law is, if the Kohen doesn't say it, he doesn't have to go, even if the Kohen knows it. And I'll just give you a few examples of why this is true. Let's say you have a Kohen. You have a Kohen, is a person of the priestly tribe, who does not know the laws of Tzaras. And a fellow comes in with white spots, and he says, is this Tzaras? And I go, I don't know. You better ask the rabbi. So I go to the rabbi. The rabbi is a big scholar. He studied the laws of Tzaras up and down. He knows Tzaras when he sees it. The guy says, is this Tzaras? The rabbi looks. He goes, yeah, it's Tzaras. He says, oh, no, do I have to leave the camp? He says, well, not yet. He says, why not? It's Tzaras. He says, because the priest didn't say you're Tameh. He didn't say you're Tameh. The priest has to say I'm Tameh. Yeah, the Torah says, V'tima o ha-kohen. The priest makes him Tameh. Because what are we going to do? He says, get your Kohen friend back over here. He calls his Kohen friend in, who doesn't know a thing about the laws of Sarat. And the rabbi, who's not a Kohen, but he's a scholar, says to the Kohen, I'll say his name is Harold, says, Harold, I used to know a Kohen named Harold. Harold, tell him he's Tameh. He goes, okay, here goes. Tameh. Okay, now you have to go outside the camp. It waits till the Kohen. Now, even further, the law is, I'll show you again very clearly this is the case. Well, let's go to the verses first, then we go to some of the halachas. Because maybe you'll think, this is some crazy rabbinic interpretation. This is very clear in the verses. Let me see if I can find the citation. Where's the citation? Okay. Did I not put it in? I feel like I should have put it in my notes. Okay, in Parsha's Metsorah, the second of the two Parshas we're discussing. Yeah, it's in Leviticus chapter 14, verse 36. So in verses 34 to 53, we have the laws regarding Sarat in the house. I told you it could appear on the walls, appear on the clothing. You have Sarat on the house, okay? It says if the person sees Sarat on the house, he sees these spots, he has to call the Kohen to come and examine it. The Torah says in verse 36, chapter 14, verse 36, the Kohen will command, and they must empty the house before the Kohen comes to see the affliction, so that that which is in the house does not become Tameh. Then the Kohen will come and look at the house. So they call the Kohen. They say, Kohen, I have white spots on my house. Can you come and look at it and tell me if it's Tzaras? He says, okay, but before I get there, you better take everything out of the house. Because if this is the Torah saying, I just read you the verse. If there are things in the house, when I see it, and I tell you it's Tzarat and it's Tameh, everything in your house is going to be Tameh. Okay? Take it all out of the house before I get there. They take it all out of the house. Then he comes. When the house is empty, they took all the furniture, empty house. He comes in, he looks, Tameh. Now the house is Tameh and the items are not. What do you mean? Before he came, it was also Tzarat. All he did was come and see, right? No. The Kohen's declaration, Tameh, is what makes it Tameh. This is clearly a spiritual malady. This is not a physical, medical sickness. And Torah itself says, as long as they take the stuff out before the Kohen says, Tameh, all that stuff is fine. How could that be? Because it's based on the words and the actions of the priest in this interaction. So again, it says, the priest will make him Tameh. Now here's an interesting law. On Yom Tov, let's say it's Passover. We just had Passover. And a guy's celebrating Passover. And he looks at his skin. Now, by the way, again, nowadays, just get this out of the way, we do not have Tzarat. We do not see this. I think after the first temple, we do not have any known incidents of Tzarat occurring. What's the reason for that? We're so late on time, it's hard to say. But in one sentence, it's hard to say it in one sentence. Maybe let's make it a question. If I don't answer it, you'll be curious. Why nowadays do we not see the Tzarat? Why only in the first temple and before that we had Tzarat, and after that we don't find occurrences of this affliction? Maybe there were in the second temple, I'm just not off the top of my head aware, but certainly not in modern times. Why not? Where did it go? Okay. Question, mystery. Well, maybe we'll explain it. But if it's Passover, and I'm celebrating Passover, ooh, yeah, Passover. That's not what we do on Passover, but just pretend I'm having a great time. It's a holiday. I'm so geared up. I'm thrilled. And suddenly I look and I see, wow, what are these white spots on my skin? I better go to a Kohen and see if it's Sarat. So he goes to the Kohen, and the Kohen says to him, I'm not telling you. What? You're not telling me? Come back to me after Passover. Come back after Passover. This is the law. Come back after Passover. What? Why should I come back after Passover? He says, because if I tell you now that this is Sarat, you will be tamei. You'll have to go outside the camp or outside the city, whatever the case is. He says, and you will be miserable on this holiday. And the Torah commands us, v'samachta b'chagecha. You must rejoice on your holidays. And you have to fulfill that obligation. And if I declare you tamei, you will not be able to rejoice on the holiday. So first, fulfill your Torah obligation of v'samachta b'chagecha, rejoice on the holiday. When the holiday's over, come back and we'll talk. And that's the law. The Kohen does not examine the Sarat spots until after Yom Tov, because we cannot reduce a person's joy on the holiday. Now, if it was a medical affliction and he's going to shul, he's going to the temple, he's going to synagogue, he's with his family, he's going to all these social gatherings with a communicable disease, are you crazy? No, it's not the way this works. Wait till after the holiday, be fine. Okay, now you're going to say that in the first place, why would anyone go to the Kohen? Why would he want to experience that? So first of all, nobody wants to have this uncomfortable, disgusting, ugly thing on him. And the only way to get cured of it is to go through the healing process. Now, that healing process is unpleasant, but the end result is that the person is rehabilitated. And there's a lesson in there that this is very, very deep and has a lot to do with the whole idea of tzara'at. The lesson is that afflictions that come on us are for our benefit. We don't like them and we don't ask for them. But when they come, we have to look and see, God's sending me a message. In what way can I learn and grow from this, that when I come out at the end of it, I'll be in a better place than I was when I started? We can use all of our afflictions, whatever they are in life, like a tzara'at, to look in the mirror and say, how can I improve? How can I improve? Again, I'm a little bit all over the place right now because I cannot say everything in my notes. So I'm kind of forced to jump from place to place. But I want to say this, which I didn't plan to say. And I apologize to anyone listening. Maybe I shouldn't even say it, but Hashem should please have mercy on me. There's a lot of suffering in this world. We all suffer from one thing or another. We look around and we see some people definitely suffer more than others. There's some people who would say, I would never trade my problems for their problems. Okay? And so therefore, I say that as a way of saying, you and I, all of us listening right now, we are not the judge of any person, right? Until you're appointed to a court, you're not the judge of any person. Just get that straight. Only Hashem is the judge of everybody. Okay? We can't look at anybody and say, he's getting this affliction because of this and that. And, why is this person so bitter all the time? Don't they see that it's a message from God that they should improve their lives? That's not my point. My point is not to trivialize anyone's suffering. My point, not at all. Not at all. Like I said, I would never ask for any afflictions. I would never judge anyone. I'm just saying there is a perspective that when a person is visited with afflictions, they should self-reflect and say, how can I change? Rather than saying, what kind of a God is this? God hates me. God is so cruel. God is bad. So I'll share with you I'm not judging anybody. I know there are people who suffer terribly and really, really struggle with faith. Really, really struggle with faith. And if I was in their shoes, I'd probably be a lot worse. Let's be honest. I would be so much worse than a lot of people who disdain religion, look down at religious people or God because they say, look at these people suffering, look at that people, or why did I suffer? They went through suffering and they lost their faith. We can never judge these people. Can never, ever, ever. Judging these people is a recipe for disaster. That's like asking for it. He should have more faith. Yeah, let's see how you deal with Chas v'Shalom, God forbid. Let's see how you deal with that situation. We're not going to judge anybody. I have to add like a million caveats before I say what I want to say, but this is a healthy perspective that we should all have in our mind. Just give you an example. The Talmud says a person is permitted to give charity with the following intent. God, in the merit of this charity, please grant healing to this loved one that I care about, this person. I'm giving charity in the merit this person should be healed. And my goodness should generate merit in the world that uplifts this individual. Please, God, accept this giving, as opposed to I'm giving charity because it's the right thing to do. I'm giving charity because I want to help people in need, right? I'm giving charity because I have an ulterior motive. I'm sick and I want to get better. God, I'm giving charity. I have an ulterior motive. I'm doing this righteous deed for that it should be good for me or someone that I care about. The Talmud says this is an appropriate intention. There's nothing wrong with that. Maybe altruism is better, but there's nothing to look down at, okay? With one exception, okay? I can't go through the whole passage in the Talmud. It's very interesting, but there's no time. The exception is a person who hinges his faith on it. If I see you perform what I want you to perform, God, on the merit of this act, then I will believe in you. But if you don't do it, then I'm out of here, right? Like anyone who saw Conan the Barbarian with Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? This great scene at the end where he's fighting a war against the bad guys that killed his parents and killed his beloved, and he wants to take revenge against them, and he bows down and he starts praying to his deity, and his deity who's that his father is like this dream that his father taught him about this deity named Kram. I'm not endorsing idolatry. It's just an interesting film. And so he kneels down at the end and he says, Kram, I've never asked you for anything my whole life except for this one thing. And that is, grant me my revenge. He says, and if you don't do that, then to hell with you. And he gets up with his sword, and now he's ready to fight, right? Grant me my revenge, Kram. This is the one thing I ever asked from you in my whole life. But if you can't grant me that, to hell with you, right? So in contrast to that, our sages tell us that is a not kosher approach to prayer, approach to doing good deeds, to say like, God, I'll serve you on the basis that you help me out in return for my service. That if a person would not get what he wanted, he would throw God by the wayside. Rather, the Talmud says a person he may say, God, I'm doing this because I want you to grant me this favor, but if it doesn't come true, the approach has to be this. This is where I'm going. Not to hell with you. The approach is something is lacking in me that I didn't merit it. Even with this, I didn't merit it. Well, let me look inward and find it. We're always supposed to be looking inward. So why am I on this? Because the person who has Sarat, he has to say, there's something deficient in me. God's sending me a signal. I need to figure out what it is. I need to go through this process. I don't want to remain this way. So he goes to the Kohen and he puts himself through the healing process because he wants to get better. And we have to look at all of our afflictions in life, and they should never come, but when they do, how can I utilize this as a healing process to introspect and become a better person? Now, so much more to say about Sarat. There's really so much more to say.
Hey, use as much time as you feel like you would like.
I know, but I'm somewhat out of time. I asked a number of questions and I do want to touch on them.
Go for
Why
it.
on the clothing, the house, why is Sarat what it is? So Sarat is an example of exactly what I was talking about before of Tuma and Tahara. Something as Tameh is closed. Something that's Tahor, it's open, it's transparent. It allows the light in. Why is Sarat white spots? Listen to what our commentators tell us. It says, because there's a divine light. There's a divine light that's shining from the source, the Almighty. And we need to open ourselves up to that divine light, to be receptacles of the divine light. And we also need to reflect the light back into the world, but from ourselves, from our essence. There's a divine core inside us. There's a soul. There's a spark of God that's given to us to shine, not even to reflect, but to shine our own light that is an extension of the divine light into the world through our actions, our behavior. We want to take in God's light. We want to give out God's light. So now what happens if a surface cannot absorb light? Anyone who knows the science of light knows that when you see a color, whatever you see, when you see a color, the thing is not actually that color. What's happening is that thing is absorbing all frequencies of light except for the frequency of light that is that color. If it's red, it means it's absorbing all frequencies of light except for red light. It's reflecting the red light. It's blocking the red light. So the red light is bouncing back into our eye. We see red when an object is actually not absorbing red. Okay? White light is all light. Color is really when that part of the light spectrum is not being absorbed. Black is that it's absorbing all light, so we don't see any of the light. A white spot means that we are repelling the divine light. Something about us is repelling the divine light. It's not allowing the light in. Remember, tamei, closed, tahor, transparent, open. When we're open, the light goes in. When we're closed, tamei, the light is repelled. The white spot means that we are repelling the light. It's not going in. We're closed. We're closed. And we want to open that up. What do I need to do to open that up? We need to go through the purification process. And it's not a pretty one for a Metsorah. It's not. We can and should talk about why, if only there's time. Now, a little bit deeper, okay. Sarat, what causes it? What causes it? There are a number of causes the Torah doesn't tell us openly what causes it, but it hints at it in a number of ways. There are a number of causes that are identified in the rabbinic literature for Sarat, but the most prominent among them, most people know this, is what's called Lashon Hara, evil speech, slander, gossip, speaking negatively of others. Why is that so? We'll see. But one of the hints of this is the fact that the person with Sarat is called a Metsorah. I said, what else should it be called? Metsorah has the same root as Sarat. So a Metsorah is someone with Sarat. So the reason our rabbis see more in this word is because the person with Sarat is described in two different ways in the Torah. Sometimes he's described as Metsorah, and sometimes he's described as Tsaruah. Without the mem. Tsaruah is just the root, the three root letters of the word Sarat. Tzadi, Resh, Ayin, for those who know Hebrew, three root letters with some vowels. Tsaruah, it's just the root. In Metsorah, the mem is extra. What is that mem doing over there? If I could say Tsaruah without the mem, why put the mem there and make it Metsorah? What am I gaining by that? So the rabbis say that the hint is to the words, we are now expanding this word into a conjoined word, not a conjunction, a compound word of the words motzi and ra. Motzi ra. Motzi ra literally means one who puts forth evil, one who puts evil out into the world. Motzi ra. Now, when a person speaks Lashon Hara, the evil speech, he's putting out. He's motzi ra. He's expelling evil words from his self, blah, 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 out into the world, blah, 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 blah. He's motzi ra. And in fact, motzi shem ra is one of the descriptions of a person who speaks slanderously in the Torah. In the case of a man who gets married, he slanders his bride, saying that she's not a virgin. He's called motzi shem ra. this person has been motzi, he's put out shem ra, a bad name on his bride. Motzi ra, that's a shem ra, he put out a bad name on his bride. But a person who speaks slanderously of others is a motzi ra, someone who puts out evil. And those words are hinted in the description of the Metsorah. He's called a Metsorah. It's an abbreviation, a motzi ra. This is a guy who speaks Lashon Hara. That's hint number one. Hint number two, there are a number of hints, but another significant one is the punishment needs to fit the crime. So we see in the treatment of the Metsorah a reflection of his treatment of others. What happens? He has to go outside the camp. Why does he have to go outside the camp? Well, he's been going around in the camp, socializing. Did you hear about this one? You know what he did? You know what he said? You know, let me tell you about this. He's gossiping about people and slandering people, and he's breaking the social connections between people. I used to like that guy, but he told me all these rotten things. I don't want to have anything to do with him now. Ugh, right? When you slander and you gossip, what you're doing is you're breaking the bonds of connectivity between people. You're separating people one from another. So your treatment is, well, now you have to be separated. That person is now so isolated and alone. Why doesn't anyone talk to me anymore? Why don't these people want to be my friends anymore? Why am I ostracized? And then suddenly this guy, you're ostracized. You cannot be part of the community. You need to go outside. You divided your victims from the community. You're divided from the community. You must be outside the camp. He has to grow his hair long. He has to tear his clothes. Why has to be unkempt and disheveled? You look at a person, he walks in the room and he looks, neat, nice haircut, a nice hairdo, a nice suit. You look at it, you go, oh, look at that guy. Woo! He looks good. He looks good. You have like nice things. You see a guy walk in the room. He's all disheveled. His hair is wild. His clothing's torn. You see that guy? Look at the way he looks. What's going on? So people want to separate from him, just like he tried separating from others. It causes like a bad, right? Now, of course, the person shouldn't do it. But in other words, he's putting himself in a position where he's now the physical manifestation of the pariah that he tried to turn that person in. You tried to make that person into, like, he looked good with his nice haircut and his suit, but you made everyone look at him like a monster. So now you're going to become the victim of your own treatment. Now that's what you look like. It says he has to cover his mouth. It says he has to cover his mouth, the Torah says. Why is he covering his mouth? Because the mouth is the tool that he used to damage other people. Cover that mouth. Cover that mouth. And what does he have to do? He has to cry out, Tame, 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 Tame. He has to cry out. In other words, he was going about other people. Oh, Tame, that guy, he's radioactive. That guy, ooh, you shouldn't have anything to do with him. He's, ooh, Tame, right? In other words, I said the word tame doesn't mean impure and unclean, but in other words, the reason that we treat tame in a way that sort of elicits this view of impure, unclean is because the lack of potential for growth is the opposite of the mission of mankind. So that's it's a disgusting state of being in the sense that what? No growth, no potential, to be closed like an animal, right? That's so repulsive that way of being, right? So it's like, Tame, it's as though he was going around that person. He's repulsive. He's repugnant. Now he has to go about himself. Stay away from me. Stay away from me. I'm radioactive. I'm repugnant. I'm repulsive, right? So everything that he did to someone else is now he has to undergo that same treatment in order to feel the catharsis of what he did wrong. And this brings him, like we talked about the korbanos, seeing the animal go through a process and envisioning yourself going through a process. Here he physically goes through a process where he is forced to introspect and to return. I'm so sorry for what I did. I'm so regretful. What I did was wrong, right? And he knows and he understands. So that's part of the catharsis. Okay, I think we said a lot. And it's just about time to stop. Maybe I'll say one more thing. So many nice things in my notes. I wish I could say it all. But we talked about the clothing, the walls. Why the clothing? Why the walls? So the commentaries explain that there was a sequence. And if a person was guilty of something that would cause him to have tzarat, first it would appear on his walls. And that was meant to be a warning sign to him. It's sort of in the distance, but, oh, I need to get the message. God is telling me something. And he needs to change his ways before it impacts him in a more personal way. If he didn't repent from the Sarat on his walls, that would appear on his clothing, would come a little bit closer to his person, but not quite on his person. Ooh, it's getting closer. That warning gets a little bit louder. Hey, guy, you're doing something wrong. You need to do teshuvah. And only finally when he didn't take the warnings did it come on his person. So again, a person should kind of look for the warning signs in his life. When you see someone else suffering calamity, maybe your first instinct shouldn't be to judge that person. Oh, look what happened to him. I guess he had it coming to him. Maybe whatever God's accounting is with him is, number one, none of your business. But number two, because it may not be that at all. There are people who suffer without sin. We have Job, and that's a whole other class. Why a person would suffer without sin. But maybe part of God's agenda, in particular, and having you be aware of it, is, hey, buddy, this message is for you. You see what happened over there? It's coming your way if you don't change your way. But in his mercy, God gives you several warnings before the person is impacted in the closest way possible. So that's the meaning of the Sarat on the home, on the clothing, on the person. I think we've said about enough. I wanted to say something about, another clue that it's from Lashon Hara. Moshe speaks negatively about the Jewish people. He says they won't listen to me. And then they did listen to him, right? But God says, go to the Jewish people, tell them this. He says, they won't listen to me. They're not going to believe. They're not going to listen. God says, put your hand in your shirt. Whoop, comes out Sarat. So that's another clue that it's for Lashon Hara, speaking negatively of others. Miriam spoke negatively of Moshe. Immediately she gets leprosy. So there are hints in the text, many hints, as I pointed out in the text, that it's for the sin of Lashon Hara. It's also in my notes. Another interesting thing is people who are aware of the mitzvah of phylacteries, tefillin, that men strap these leather boxes with scrolls inside to their head and to their arm, and with black straps. Why are they black? So they're black for the same reason that Sarat is white, because the purpose of the tefillin is to absorb the divine light. So it's black because black is a sign of all the frequencies of light being absorbed. So the same reason for the black color on the tefillin, which goes on the skin, is the reason that Sarat is white on the skin. It's repelling the divine light. Person is closed. He's tameh. Okay, so I think we said enough on this topic. There was a lot of information in that class. It's very late. I don't want to take any more time, any of your time any more of my time. So I got to go. I got to close it there. I hope you got something out of this class.
Oh, yes.
William.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for having me on.
Hey, man, you did a wonderful job. And I like that final closing facial. That was a great snapshot. In fact, I'm going to go back and I'm going to actually get a screenshot of you in that spot. And I'm going to use that for just a happy ad for you.
I'm going to become a meme.
You're going to become a meme. That's great. Oh, yeah. So it's been a great show. Thank you so much for your education and for sharing all this stuff with us. This certainly is one I'm going to go back and rewatch because, like I said, there's a lot of stuff that I've just heard. I've been exposed to a lot, but there's a lot of things in this week that really I was like, what? I didn't catch that before. So it's going to be really good for me to go back and rewatch this a couple times probably. So. But, great one as usual, and I look forward to seeing you, Hashem willing, same time, same place next week. And so for all you people for tuning in, thank you so much, and we will look forward to seeing you on the other side. Shalom, shalom, everybody. Peace.
Bye.
Hello, my dear friends. Hope this message finds you well. If you like the way this channel is going, and the channel has been a blessing to you, please consider supporting the channel by going to the website, TaNaChTalk.com, TaNachTalk.com. Thank you once again for your time and for supporting TaNaCh Talk. Shalom.
חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה